guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now this is going to be an ability breakdown slash rant type of video. So first and foremost, we're going to keep things as civil as possible, and we're actually going to break down my boy Sentry, and then we're going to tell everybody exactly what I think of this buff and buffs of this nature, or champion designs of this nature. But first things first, obviously Sentry is a long time fan favorite up for buff. He's one of these 6 champions that will be available for the first time as a 7-star in the banquet event, with that new box mechanic as well. And god, that actually annoys me, because I want nothing to do with a high rarity Sentry as of right now. The most toxic thing Kabam could do is actually force us to use and or rank him in the new Korean challenge events. But let's just get to the nitty gritty. So, Sentry has 5 in damage, but it's not 5 in damage like, you know, CGR or something. It's 5 in damage, kind of like Aegon type of thing. So that automatically, you know, means something. Survivability, number 3, nothing too particular there. Ease of use, 4, so very simple to use. 3 in utility, 1 in defender strength, so he has 0 defender strength effectively. So Sentry is all about applying debuffs, gaining buffs, then converting those buffs into passives, and he does all about he will gain solar energy and progress through solar forms and basically ramp up his attack. So, ramping damage, Sentry gets stronger over the course of the quest, gaining massive damage. Sentry has a slew of debuffs to apply to the opponent. If you need non-damage or time debuffs, he has them in spades. Buff conversion, Sentry has the ability to convert any buff type into a Fury, giving him tons of damage. Instead, he doesn't really gain many buffs himself. That's meant to be interacting purely with nodes. Weaknesses, Purify, as many science champions. Energy resistance, large portion of Sentry's damage comes from his burst of energy damage. And Atrophy, making the buffs expire quicker. So, his abilities. Sentry is immune to Nullify, Fate Seal, and Incinerate effects. Nullify immune, Fate Seal immune, that's good. Obviously, Science class in general doesn't really rely on buffs. He does, so that Nullify immunity feels in place. Having Incinerate immunity, it's fine. You know, it's a solid immunity, 1. Sentry converts any critical damage rating bonuses into attack rating, increasing his attack rating by up to 3,927. That also will be masteries including. So, if you do have the Cruelty Mastery active, that's actually going to translate directly to the attack rating. Bulwark buff, max 20. Whenever Sentry inflicts a debuff, gain a 60 Bulwark buff for 25 seconds. If Sentry would gain a precision buff from the Dexterity Mastery, he instead gains one of his Bulwark buffs. This ability cannot grant more than 1 Bulwark buff every 0.5 seconds. While personal Bulwark buff is active, Mystic Champion's combat power rate cannot exceed the amount they started the fight with. Fair enough. It's not the combat power rate you really typically worry about the Mystic Champions, but you know, that should be quite easy to upkeep, making him slightly bit buffer, but those are very, very tiny buffs. Buff conversion. On the final hit of a special attack, convert all active buffs into 15-second passive or of the corresponding type. Bulwark passives have a doubled potency, so 120 basically, max tax 20. Fury passives increase attack rating by 400, max tax 40. Regeneration passives heal for 800, max tax 20. Any effect not listed is Fury passives. Okay, Sentry's bread and butter. So, solar forms. Whenever the Sentry converts a buff into a passive, he gains 1 solar energy. When reaching 20 or more solar energy, consume all of them. Change solar forms in the order of base, absolute strength, and brilliant might. So they have taken away some of his solar forms and adjusted and altered them. While not in a solar form, Sentry's basic attacks inflict exhaustion, debuff for 20 seconds, max tax 10. So you can easily have 10 exhaustion debuffs on the opponent just about at any given time. And that is good against Sasquatch, and that's just about it, really. It stops Sasquatch from gaining his charges, and other than that, I believe it stops Mordo from evading. I might be mistaken there, but that's about it. Brilliant Might. Absolute Strength empowers light and medium attacks, while active empowered attacks inflict a 10% Wither debuff for 20 seconds, max tax 10. So here, when you do get all of your Wither debuffs active, then you basically shut off opponent's ability power gain. That's a good debuff to have, unlike the exhaustion. And then Brilliant Might empowers heavy attacks, while active empowered attacks inflict 2,250 energy vulnerability debuffs for 20 seconds, max attacks 10. So basically in this form, spam your heavy attacks. All empowered attacks deal additional 50% of damage dealt as a burst of energy damage, gain 117 attack rating for each debuff on the opponent, up to 99 debuffs. This can give you a solid attack increase. When reaching 20 solar energy, while in Brilliant Might, remove any solar forms and gain a reality warp. So that's kind of like your cycle finished. Reality warp persistent charge, you can get up to 10 of these. Sentry gains 1 reality warp whenever he wins a fight and loses 1 whenever he is defeated. Each reality warp increases the attack rating. Empowered attacks gain per debuff by 50%. While at 3+ reality warps, heavy attacks refresh personal debuffs. While at 6+ reality warps, charging a heavy attack after landing a first medium attack inflicts stun passive for 0.75 seconds. And while at 8+ reality warps, Sentry starts each fight with absolute strength, thus kind of skipping the first ramp up phase where you do significantly less damage. Special attack 1 on activation, inflict non-stacking halt debuff for 20 seconds. I believe halt stops the unstoppable, so he has an unstoppable counter. Unstoppable still trigger. They are active, you just ignore them effectively. So it's kind of like Valkyrie or kind of like the Grit, except it's a debuff. So instead of Grit being placed on champion, halt is as a debuff on defender. Halt is a new debuff type, it will stop opponents inflicted from... There you go. Think Grit but a debuff. Special attack 2, Soaring Strike. On activation, Sentry gains 1 of his personal Fury passives for each debuff on the opponent, up to 10. So this is where you get a lot of your Fury passives. And then special attack 3, Channel the Void. Instead of solar energy, Sentry gains regeneration buff for each buff converted into passive by this attack. Regeneration buffs generated from this attack heal 500 some over 15 seconds. Max attacks 20. It's not absolutely massive, but then the point is to try and convert them into the passives and almost double their potency and increase duration. And one thing that you notice, he doesn't gain any buffs by himself really, aside from the bulwarks over there. So that's kind of on purpose. That convert the Fury buffs into Fury passives or any other type of buff into Furies. It's only for the node interactions, not his own abilities. So let's go. Signature ability. When struck by a base attack, gain indestructible passive by 2 seconds, cooldown half a minute. When Sentry enters solar form with more than 20 solar energy, he pauses personal debuffs on the opponent for half second for each solar energy over 20. It's probably quite neat to have this. Only that is it as far as Sentry is concerned. And there's like a massive problem here, obviously. Immediately. Like as soon as Kabam said that the best place for a champion's incursions, you know that the champion is dead on arrival. And he really is. Realistically, only people that I can see potentially ranking up Sentry are the Sentry fans and newer players. But even most of the newer players, if they, follow the game remotely, they probably won't. Unless they do it by mistake. Here is what I personally believe. You are free to disagree with me. This game has no place for average champions if that is all they are. Quite simple as that. There is absolutely no point or very little point in investing any resources, time or energy into champions that are designed specifically for long form content if they are only good for long form content, which Sentry is. I could kind of take a look at here at the champions such as Serpent. Serpent is a good example how to avoid that. Because offensively, Serpent's great. I actually really like using him offensively, and he is made for long fights. And even though his damage here is 2.5, in long fights, it's massive. He's also like ramp uppy, and he can put up massive damage. And obviously his damage, his defender strength is 5, and Serpent has a place in the game. Everybody uses him as a defender 99% of the time, but you can use him offensively, and he was one of my MVPs for Act 9.1. I used him in beta for 9.2, and he does great in the Eternity of Pain challenges where you need to deal with 1,000,000+ health pools. And I'm sure that you can bring him into like Labyrinth and get like very good solid results, because in longer fights he ramps up extremely, extremely well, even if he's not like a persistent charge champion. The point being is he has another role. And effectively, he's kind of built like Aegon, because you do want to get all 10 of the reality warps, so you might not need to ramp him up as long as you would Aegon, but you'd still need a very, very substantial runway. In a game where average quest is 6 fights long plus the boss, and then there's just the Everest content, you're not really going to do anything with this guy. You maybe can kind of use him in Alliance War, but you're probably not going to want to do that if his damage buildup is very, 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 very slow. What I personally believe is that Kabam, as a generic rule, should avoid from creating Everest champions if that is all they are. We have champions that are amazing for Everest content and then some. And those are champions that are automatically going to get picked over champions that are only good for Everest content, unless they are like the very, very, very best. If Sentry is like better than Aegon and available 7-star, then maybe when Necropolis 2.0 comes out, we will end up taking up Sentry then. Up until then, you pull him and you leave it at rank 1 as a 7-star, more than likely. Because he has no defensive value. You don't need another questing champion. Nobody needs another questing champion, because any half-decent champion is a questing champion. You don't need an incursions champion, because, a ton of actually good champions are crazy in incursions, and just having another champion that's also good at incursions adds 0 value. Like when you can bring in Hercules or Silk or Red Skull or Bullseye with some insanely broken hacks. Why would you want Sentry? What's he better? Doubt that he will be. And even if he is, I'd rather save my catalysts and use whatever I have ranked up for other game modes already anyways. It genuinely feels like a waste of space, waste of buff space, waste of effort, whoever worked on this buff. Because champions like this will never be popular with any meaningful portion of players. There will always be somebody that, jumps in the comment section and says Sentry is like my favorite champion, he's amazing, he can do that. And yeah, all of that is anecdotal. Statistically speaking, just by the nature of this buff, I can guarantee you that Sentry is going to be the least desired and least ranked up champion from the 6 champions buffed. Even if I'm not a big fan of some of the others, I do like some. I'm going to break that down as well in a separate video. But Sentry automatically, just by the sheer length of his ramp up, 0 defensive value, 0 potential value in like battleground, 0 potential value or necessity for him in general questing and alliance wars and stuff like that. I don't care for the champion. Which is a shame, because we have waited for Sentry buff such a long, long time, and I would have loved this guy as somebody formidable. And he isn't. He's not going to be. Again, only reason I will end up ranking him at some point, some time, is either A, if Kabam makes me, as in like, here's a Korean challenge, like you must use Sentry to defeat this and that Necropolis fight. Or B, if they design a piece of content that's kind of like tailor-made for him. And that's, sheer pure manipulation by Kabam. It's not making him an objectively needed and good champion. It's Kabam demanding that he's used effectively. So, out of all of the 6 buffs, this is definitely that I'm interested in the least, that I want the least, that I care for the least, and that I want very, very little to do with. In fact, this buff single-handedly made me wish that box mechanic didn't exist. Because now, let's say theoretically, if I get 6 of those keys for that box, I will eventually have to pick this guy, and I really don't want. I'd pick any other champion above him. So here we go. That's Sentry buff. A fucking waste of time. That's what it is, really, and for like 99% of the players. And I'm sorry, you know, I'd hope he's good. I would have loved to play with him, but I just don't see it happening. Let me know what you think, and I'll catch you guys soon. Bye-bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the next